Hello, hello, my friends. AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink. Welcome back to my face and my card making space. And a couple of cards using all oldie but goodie products from Honeybee Stamps. I was inspired by, it was like a florist shop, somewhat local to me, posted an image recently of these tulips that they had you could buy in bundles, and they weren't local enough that I could like go and get them, and they sold out. But it caught my eye because I was like, is this an AI image? Like, I've never seen a color combo like this on tulips before. So then I did some searching and some Googling, and they're called Bubblegum tulips. I can't post any images on here because I don't own the rights to any images, but if you Google Bubblegum tulips, you'll see what I mean. They're the coolest things ever. So, it stuck, it's one of those, like, it just stuck in my head, and I was like, I need to do this color combo. I need to do it on tulips. And then I was like, do I want to do stamps? Do I want to do dies? Dies obviously won out, specifically the Lovely Layers Tulips wafer die set that Honeybee released. I don't even remember when this came out. I'm pretty sure I've done a video or two already using this. I do have a playlist of the Lovely Layers, like cards I've done using Lovely Layers sets by Honeybee. I'll have that playlist linked at the end of this video because there's been many that have been released since they started these however many years ago. Some of my favorite dies to work with, because especially like these florals are huge. Love. So I also did them as 5x7 cards, which I don't do as often, but I do. So I did just a combo of like ink blending and a whole bunch of die cutting and all the things. And like I always do, I will have links to everything I used in the description box below, as well as on my blog. All my links are affiliate links. All that means is that if you use my links and place an order, I get a little kickback at no extra cost to you as the customer, and that just helps pay the bills, keeps the lights on, etc. And yeah, in the blog post, it's picture links, a little easier to navigate. And I think that's all I have to say. Yeah, just keep watching, and I'll show you guys how I made these cards. Yeah, I had fun making these. So, to start off with, like I said, Honeybee Lovely Layers Tulips wafer die set. All of their Lovely Layers do have layering guides on the Honeybee website. If you have some of the older sets that didn't come with it, etc., that always helps. Like I always say with the Lovely Layers sets, though, once you layer up just one set, once you use it once, it just makes sense. Largest to smallest most of the time, and it's very, if I can do it, anybody can do it. It doesn't require a whole lot of effort. Anyway, I'm also using, this is the Altenew Ultra Sticky Matte Grid. It's meant for their stamp wheel, but you can use it on its own. I got this in an order not too long ago because I was, as always, curious. Did I need it? No. You guys know, I got all my grip mats, sticky mats, like, I have so many random tools, but I'm always like, ooh, a new one. So I pulled that out. And the thing with the Altenew ones is the grid side, or on camera it looks like the bumpy side, faces either your work surface or the stamp wheel, if that's what you're using, and the smooth side facing up. So that's what I did. And then I'm just using it to hold my die cuts in place so I can do a ton of ink blending. And for all that ink blending, I'm also using Altenew fresh dye inks. Had lots and lots of questions about these because I've shown them in a video so far, and I did a live recently where I was just labeling a bunch of them. I still haven't swatched them, haven't had time. I'll get to it, and that might be a live because a lot of requests for it, but one thing at a time. Anyway, I'm just having fun playing with them. So I pulled out colors to create this just look of them, of these bubblegum tulips, because yeah, they're like kind of turquoisey, pinky, purpley, like they're beautiful. I would love to grow them, but I live in Saskatchewan. Our climate is, we can grow tulips, but they're generally pretty basic. But I'm going to be keeping my eye out because I was like, man, if the science wizards that can hybridize things, I was like, if I can get my hands on these and they'll grow in our climate, I will be planting them because they're so pretty. Anyway, I started with Puffy Heart. And I went in with purple wine, so two short, like pinky shades. And for my blending, I'm using the Waffle Flower Shader 1 Plus brushes. And that ended up being the only brushes I use is these ones. I had pulled out like all my Waffle Flower brushes because I was really going to get into it, but this just worked. And also, this looks like a hot mess. I know. Trust me. Just trust the process. The thing with the lovely layers is you can tell which parts you're actually going to see because those are the parts that have the details, the deboss lines, etc., that are like pressed into the cardstock when you die cut. So all of the like on the like those top pieces, the large pieces, I'm not worried about the spots that are smooth. They have no detail on them because you're not going to see them. And again, this makes more sense, and I've shown it in other videos that sometimes I will just place all the layers together to give me a visual. And it's like, okay, this is what I can see. This is the areas I need to concentrate on because everything else is getting covered up. So I don't have to be like fancy about it. So hopefully that makes sense. And then for my turquoise shades on these, I used Teal Cave and Galactic Stream. And as those blend with the pinks, they create that like purple shade. Love was perfect. Once this started coming together, I was like, yes, this is so fun. And then I used 3 different shades for the little like centers, like the stamens. And that was Warm Sunshine, Caramel Toffee, and Paper Bag. And again, I'll link to all the things with the supplies. And here I'm just starting to like layer it up so you can see like what I was going for. And it was like, yes. I was like, these are so fun. So again, this largest one, easiest thing in the world. Everything just makes sense as you're layering it. It's like, oh, this fits here. Done. Like, yeah. I don't have any other words to kind of describe the simplicity. And again, I've said this, like the less thinking I have to do, the better. Even with these cards ended up being somewhat clean and simple in a sense, but I had to put in extra thinking, but later on, and I'll explain that. Anyway, I layered up all of these pieces, and then I'm going to just go on to doing all the other blending. So I did wipe my mat off in between because obviously like I have, the teal colors, etc., like all those inks sitting on the mat, and I didn't want to be picking all of those up. This process was working, like going from the lighter pink to the darker pink to the 2 aqua teal sort of shades. So the next tulip, because there's 3 sizes in that die set. There's that big one, the big open one, this starting to open, and then there's the little bud. And I did more than this set of all of these tulips because I wanted to do, a cluster, etc., but I only included this footage. And exact same process. I laid them all out on my sticky mat with largest to smallest, and then went lightest to darkest with the inks. So Puffy Heart, and then I went in with the purple wine, and then I go in with the Teal Cave, which is the second darkest turquoise sort of shade, and then the Galactic Stream, which is the darkest. And again, once everything started like coming together, and then you actually layer them, because this looks like not as big of a hot mess as the first ones, but still a bit of a hot mess, but it just works. So, and also in that playlist that I mentioned in the intro, with all the different, like I've shown so many different ways of doing these lovely layers sets, either ink blending, coloring with markers, ink smushing, just using like solid color cardstock. Like the sky's the limit. There's so many options, and just not enough time for me to make all the things. So same thing, layered these up, and then I've got that one, and these are so fun. And regardless of the fact that, yes, these exist in real life, which just blows my mind. But I've said this before, especially when it comes to like florals, etc. Do whatever you want. Like, it doesn't matter. Even if these didn't exist in real life, why can't you make them? It's paper, and it's art, and it's fun. So I'm just kind of stoked that these do actually, like these colors on tulips, exist. But do whatever floats your boat, purples and pinks and blues and greens and orange. Like, yeah, Why not? Why not? So yeah, I happened to be inspired by something that actually was real, but if it hadn't have been, still would have done it, you know? So anywho, I went on to do the little buds. There's just 3 little pieces to these, same exact process, did all the ink blending, and then layered the pieces together, largest, the medium, and then the smallest. And then I've got all of my little buds, and went in and adhered all those together. And then for the greenery, I die cut extras of the largest leaf that's actually meant to layer on that largest stem. And I used all 4 green inks from this one quad. This is the Forest Trail quad. So again, started with the lightest, which was aloe vera, and just blended that onto all of the pieces. And then I start going in with the darker shades, just working my way lightest to darkest and kind of leaving lighter areas. I'm not worried about the leaves that are attached to the stems on the die cuts, because those are getting covered up, because I'm going to adhere the individual die cuts on top. So I'm just leaving that. The only things that matter are the actual individual leaves and then the stems themselves. So went from aloe vera, matcha tea. I was going to stop at swamp. This is swamp green. And I was like, ooh, these are pretty. You know, do I need to add the darkest shade? And I did, which is oak moss. And I'm glad I did, because that one just bumped it up. These do dry back, you know, from what they look like right now, right on camera. These soften, they dry back, similar to other inks I've shown on my channel. So that's always something to keep in mind too, is, you know, things will change a little bit, but they're just not as intense as they look right here. And they dried back and they soften, and they're just pretty. I've been really happy with these things so far, but again, I'm still at the baby stages. Anywho, stems. I pulled out one of the wafer dies from the Lovely Layers Spring Greenery die set, and that's what's all along. And I just cut a bunch of scraps because I was already doing all the die cutting anyway. So I die cut because I'm going to extend all these stems. You don't need to do this. You don't need to use a wafer die either. You could just trim like a little strip, like just hand cut little pieces of cardstock. That would work too. I just used the wafer die because 1, I already had it, and 2, I was already doing the die cuts, and I prefer using the die cuts versus like even fussy cutting a little wonky stem, which yes, super easy. I would rather die cut. It's just easier. So, and I'll show in the video how I like extend all these stems, because as you can see, like they're all little, and I needed them to be long because they're all going to go into the jar. And if I left them like this, there would be no stems. And I was like, no. So I'll get to that. So I adhered the leaves onto the largest stem, and actually that, in retrospect, I wouldn't have done, because I ended up cutting them off. But this was I was just flying, you know, just I had a rough idea and I'm just going with it. All the smaller stems, I adhered the leaves. That one was fine. And then another idea I had, I was like, ooh, this is a fun way to add a little extra something. I pulled out my Jelly Roll Stardust pen. This is the OG. Back before we had any of the options that we have now. Like, this has always basically existed. This thing's existed since like the beginning times. Yeah, just a little pen with shimmer. So people ask me like why I don't use this when I use my you know, tonic aqua shimmer pens, because they have the brush tip. This gives you a fine detail because it's a literal ballpoint pen with shimmer, which is perfect for these, because all I'm doing is just tracing the debossed lines on these tulips with that pen. So I'm not covering the entire thing with shimmer. I'm just tracing those little lines, which is super quick and simple, because it's just debossed. So you just follow along, and it just is going to give these that little extra something without being completely overboard. But I don't mind going overboard either. Anyway, so I did that to all the tulips, set them aside. And then the jar I was talking about. This is the mason jar vase die set. And I die cut it also from smooth white cardstock and line them up on the sticky mat. And I'm using the 2 lightest shades from the quad of Altenew colors. And the lightest one is Dewdrops. So for that, I just used a little blending brush, completely covered. And just looking back at this footage right now, like it looks a little splotchy. That's how I knew these inks smooth out, because they don't look like this when they're dry. They do smooth out as they dry. So I was quite impressed with that, because I wasn't too worried anyway, because I was like, this is actually, there's going to be the stems over this and the vellum. And so it doesn't need to be perfect, but also it was just a nice thing to know that it's like, oh, okay, this is another, line of inks that I don't have to worry so much about, getting a really great blend. It does it for me. Love. So I used a piece of Post-it tape, taped across those, and then went in with the second lightest shade, which was Aqualicious, to make it look like water in the jar. So this part, yeah, I got to explain my thought process. I'll come back to the jar. First off, extending the stems, like I said. So I took those little die cuts that I had made with that stem from the Lovely Layers Spring Greenery, and I'm just adhering them. I snipped off the little top portion, and then here I'm snipping off the big leaf from that stem, because just the way I'm going to organize everything, I didn't want them attached. And then, yeah, I'm just gluing them together. It just works. And the joining, between the two wafer dies, not even really going to see it, because again, that vellum layer is going to go on top of it. So yeah, like I said, you can totally just kind of eyeball it and trim them, or skip it if that's not your thing. This was pretty easy to do. I just adhered them together and then just snipped off any little jaggedy bits that kind of stuck out past the two, pieces adhered together. And I just worked my way, just gluing all these pieces together. Yeah. So then I've got longer stems so that they can be sitting in that jar and you'll actually see them. And then, yeah, this was, this is what I was talking about earlier with, like, this required some thinking because yeah, I cut a vellum layer with that jar, and I want to put the stems and the leaves between the vellum layer and the die cut jar that I ink blended on. And like I always say, you can see adhesive through vellum, and I'm purposely, doing all of this to avoid that. Another option you could do is like run the vellum through like a Xyron machine and put adhesive across the back of it, or with a sticky sheet, to get a solid piece of adhesive. I try to avoid that more often than not, because it's one, I don't know. I just don't do that. It would have worked for this, but at the time I wasn't really thinking about it. I had a plan to, attach the vellum. So anyway, I organized all my stems, haphazardly for the most part, really. Got them organized, kind of tucked some of those individual leaves in there. And then I was just using some low tack tape. This is the Tonic Craft Perfect dye tape. I've been using this. I've been enjoying it, and kind of held it in place here. And then I just flipped everything around. It just works. I don't know. Because because the vellum is kind of stuck to it, if that makes sense. And then I put adhesive just on the back of the bottom portions of all these stems and leaves, and then just kind of winged it and pressed it into place. It worked. Off camera, I can't remember if it was this one or the other one. I ended up actually having to peel everything back up because I didn't arrange them properly when I adhered it back. And it was this one. And I fixed it and it was fine. So many mistakes were made. In the end, I got finished cards out of it. So it works. So to officially adhere the vellum, I just ran that line of glue right towards the under the lip there, or the little ridge, on the jar. And that will show. So to cover that, I wrapped baker's twine, because it was an easy way to, include baker's twine in my cards, because that's what I've been doing, like with pretty much every single card lately, because I'm just on that kick. And it just looks cute. And then it also covers the adhesive. So I wrapped that into place. So that's the only spot where the vellum right now is actually like glued in place, is right underneath that baker's twine. So I wrapped the baker's twine around, used my reverse tweezers, tied it in a bow, trimmed off the excess, set those aside. I did that to both of the jars, and then set them aside to let the glue like fully dry. And then for my sentiments for these cards, I'm using the Big Time Kindness stamp set from Honeybee. This was another one where it's like, should have used my MISTI for this. I ended up having to stamp this sentiment like 4 times Could have saved myself the aggravation. I just used my MISTI. It would have been just easier. I used an acrylic block. You know, I used my anti-static powder tool first. That just helps keep the embossing powder from clinging to anything other than the stamped image. And then I inked up the stamp and stamped it with clear embossing ink. And then I'm coating it with Simon's silver embossing powder. And you can't really tell on camera, but like in person, I missed a few spots here and there. So again, I had to end up redoing this like more than once. And so yeah, I should have just used my MISTI. But hindsight, as always. But I made it work, and I ended up using the scraps. I die cut them for the layers to build up the sentiment, so it's fine. So coated it with the silver embossing powder, melted that with my heat tool, and then I'm going to use the coordinating wafer die to die cut these sentiments, and then also die cut the scraps to build up the sentiment when I go to adhere it to the card front. So I'm going to tape the sentiment into place with some washi tape so that it doesn't shift when I run it through my die cut machine. And then my card base is going to be a 5x7 card. So I've got 2 sheets of Simon's 120 pound smooth white cardstock, same cardstock I was using for everything else. And I'm cutting it down to 10 inches by 7 inches. So just getting it lined up and getting those trimmed down. And then I'm going to score both of these at 5 inches. So these will be side folding 5x7 cards. So got my little Teflon bone folder and my little score buddy, or as Kathy Zielinski's husband calls it, the scur buddy for all your scurring needs. That forever lives in my head rent free every single time now that I pull out the score buddy. I'm like, it's the scur buddy. Anyway, scored both of these cards to get a good crisp score line, because especially with this cardstock, this is 120 pound cardstock. It is heavyweight. You need to score it in my opinion, and that just helps it from keeps it from cracking when you score it. And then my card fronts are just a separate piece of white cardstock that is about 4.5 by 6.5, just slightly smaller than the card base. And I adhered my mason jar with its cluster of stems and leaves. And then I started adhering the florals. And that's why I did everything kind of separately like this, because it was just easier in a sense to do, the arrangement and then to add just the actual florals on afterwards. So I just adhered them into place also with just craft tacky glue. And then the little buds I end up sticking into place with a few little foam squares, because, I've got all that dimension going on with all the different die cuts. And then afterwards, like off camera, I end up tucking, because I had a couple of the leaf die cuts left over, and I end up like trimming down a couple and I tuck them in amongst the cluster to finish it off. And then here's where I made another mistake. I adhered this stem because I wanted this one like just kind of laying on the ground, like in front of the jar. And I thus gave me an opportunity to hide a little more adhesive behind that vellum, so then now there's a second point of adhesion with the vellum. But I forgot the lid, because the mason jar die set has a lid, and I had die cut the lid and I completely forgot about it. And I could have just left it off. It's fine. But I really wanted the lid. And I was like, no, I got this, I got the sentiment adhered. I ended up moving the sentiment. I was going to put it there and then decided to stick it on the kind of lower right there. So I only ended up needing like the one little end, but again, it's fine. I'm just, like I said, I was just flying by the seat of my pants and just figuring it out as I went along. So got those little pieces just adhered just on the end there, so I can adhere that to the jar. And it was after I adhered the sentiment that I saw the jar lid that I'd already die cut, and I was like, no. So I very carefully peeled off the stem on that tulip on the bottom, and you can see it like tore, but it was fine. And then I kind of peeled up the floral, and then I was able to insert the lid kind of under it. And the lid I die cut from Simon's matte silver cardstock. So it just kind of went with everything. So I just tucked the lid into place, re-adhered that stem right on top where it originally was, and then stuck a bit more glue under the little floral, pressed it into place, and we're good to go. So after that little learning experience, the second card front came together much quicker, because I knew what I was doing. This is also why a lot of times I like doing more than one card, because it gives me time to figure things out. So the card bases, we're back to that. I folded them inside out and then just used a little bit of my Easy C tape to tape it closed so that I could put it in my MISTI, because I learned my lesson from the heat embossing, and the sentiments are quite large. Again, that's part of it. So I lined it up, and I'm using sentiments from that same Big Time Kindness stamp set. And the You're Amazing script I stamped with the purple wine ink. So I'd lined that up, inked it up, stamped that onto the inside of both of these card bases, and then wipe that off, remove it, and then I added a little sub-sentiment from that same stamp set. So got that lined up, made sure it was straight, just gave it one little more boop there. And then that one I inked up with the Teal Cave color, and inked that up a couple times, stamped that as well, and then did that onto the second card base. So I got those those stamped into place. And then once the sentiments were stamped, I've got my final little bits of florals and stems that were left over from, filling the card fronts. So I adhered the one little bud and its little stem, and then the medium size tulip, adhered that stem and then that tulip. Did that to both of the insides, flipped them around, and just trimmed off the little bits of the stems that were hanging over the edges of the cards. And then I can fold the cards back up the way they're meant to be. And then for the card fronts that are now almost complete, I'm going to pop those into place with Simon's Big Mama foam tape. So it'll pop it up just a little bit, gives it that little bit of dimension, but not a whole ton of bulk. So got that on the back, peeled off the backing, popped that onto the card front, repeated that with the second card. And then as my final little bit of embellishment, I have these little silver pearls. These are from the metallic mix pearl stickers from Honeybee. And these are self-adhesive. So I just peel them off with my little die pick and then press them into place. So I don't use silver very often, but it just works because I was, the mason jar, and I was like, well, the lids are silver, hence. And then I was like a silver sentiment and then silver embellishments. It just works. So when I do decide to pull silver out, I'm pleased with it. So anywho, that finished off the cards. So I'm gonna turn the flashlight on my phone so you guys can actually see this shimmer, because it was hard to pick up on camera. And I was like, you guys need to see the sparkle. The Stardust Jelly Roll pen. It's another oldie but goodie favorite. So isn't it pretty? I love it. I love it. So like I said in the intro, I will have links to all the things in the description box below the video. If you just expand that, there'll be a link to the blog post with like photo links and the photos of the cards, etc. And at the end of the video, in the end screen, I'll have that playlist that I mentioned with all the videos I've done so far using various Honeybee Lovely Layers sets. So you can check that out as well if you haven't seen those. Thank you all so very much for taking the time to watch my videos, for thumbs upping and commenting. Subscribe if you haven't. I'd love to have you. And I will see you all very soon in the next one. Bye.